Hello fellow LEGO fans and welcome back to my tutorial on how to make LEGO building instructions. Today I want to first go over part snapping. Roland Melkert pointed out on my previous video that part snapping is a feature in LDCad which anyone can use. However, before we get into that, I want to also go over to his website as he has some additional information I would like to share with you before sharing the function of part snapping and what it actually does. So let's go over to his website. There we go. Part snapping is implemented on his website. You can read this bit if you're interested. Is implemented in LDCad and in a very basic way. This also results in some parts acting weird or not working at all with part snapping enabled. In this case, if that happens, like right now I tell you so you can be prepared on it. If that happens, you can go back to grid-based editing, which I explained in the previous video, and use that to position the part correctly. So that's a thing I like to mention. He does also mention some improvements are planned. However, the system will always be a supportive tool rather than something you can actively rely on to create full-on like 3000 piece models. So keep that in mind when you want to use part snapping. There is some bugs in there still. So yeah. Now let's go back over to my model and I'll show you how to enable part snapping and what it actually does. So first off, what does part snapping do? What I showed you in a previous video is I grab a part, drag it into the frame or my building space, and I manually position it with the arrows and the rotation tool. Now what part snapping does is instead it takes your part and snaps it to whatever stud you guide it to. So that is able to make your, or like speed up your build process by a fair amount, let's just say. So that's a really useful tool. So this is part snapping enabled. As you can see, it snaps to every stud I move it to, which is actually a really nice feature to have. Now, how do you enable part snapping? There's two ways. On the keyboard, you can hit Shift P. That enables or disables part snapping. So I have pressed that combination. So now if I move a part in, you see it doesn't snap to the pieces anymore. But if I hit Shift and P again, it does snap to the studs again. So that is the first way on enabling part snapping. The second way is right here in the bottom left. You have this navigation grid that you can also use to rotate your model. And then on the bottom left of that rotation grid, you have this button called PS. At least at the moment it is called PS. But as you can see in the description, it says enable or disable part snapping. So when we click that, it changes to a red GS, which means grid snapping, which is what I showed you in the previous episode. And if you hit it again and it says PS and it is green, it means part snapping is enabled and it snaps to every stud that you pointed to. So that is part snapping. Another thing I neglected to mention is shortcuts on the keyboard, because the keyboard does have some shortcuts. Now, if you, for example, drag a long piece in, but you want to rotate it, what I showed you initially is use the rotate tool provided when you release the part. What you can also do is instead, when you hold on to the part, use your arrow keys. There you go, using my arrow keys to rotate the piece in any way you desire. So as you can see, I can turn it any way I want. So I can then turn it around, and then with part snapping enabled, I can put it on the beam that I want it to be at, which is able to actually speed up my build process and thus shortening the time that I need to create my 3D models, which is really nice because we don't want to spend hours upon hours on just building, right? We want the instructions to be out as quick as possible so we work as efficient as possible. Now, another great shortcut there is to change between the functions of this wheel, because at the moment it is set to rotate, but we can also set it to move around the part, right? Now there's on the keyboard, if you hit R, it switches to rotate, and if you hit M, it switches to move. Now if it's in the move position, you can also use your arrow keys, which I am clearly hitting right now, to move around the part. And if you hit R, you have the rotate piece, and then when you use the arrow keys again, you can rotate the part as well. Now, another one, addition to rotation, is right now it is set to 15-degree offset per step. You can also change that. If you hit Control 2, it switches to a 5-degree offset, and if you hit Control 1, it switches to a 1-degree offset. So this allows for a much finer control of the rotation, on the rotation of your parts. And when we go back to Control 3, it goes back to a 15-degree rotation. And I have to set it back 10 degrees. There we go. So that is the shortcuts I wanted to go over quickly on the keyboard. And yeah, that is that bit. Now the next thing I want to mention, I kind of neglected to mention in the previous episode, but I did go over the subject, and that is submodels. So as you know, in this build I've shown you that I used a submodel for my differential and then for my idler gear or idler axle, but I never told you exactly why we want to use submodels. So a submodel pretty much translate into a blank slate in the instructions that you're going to make, or a new page where you don't add to your existing model, but you start a new, well, supplementary model that you can then drag onto your main model. So to give you an example on what I mean with that is right here we go over to my big boy instructions, where I've used a lot of submodels. So what does a submodel mean? Right here we're building a submodel. Yeah, we're starting from a blank slate, right? We have 4 parts in our parts list, and then we have 4 parts in our model. And when we go on, we just add more parts to it. And then in the end, when we are done, apparently I have 2 in a line, but when we are done, we put the image of the finished submodel onto our main model and point out where it needs to go. So in this way, you make it easier to build your own model. I know it sounds a bit weird, but it just makes it easier to build and to follow, because adding parts to nothing is more notable than adding parts into something that's really big. For example, do I have a good example further down? Right here. Here you can see I add a light on the front of the big boy. Now if I were to have done this by just adding the individual pieces on the front, you would have never noticed. But because I used a submodel, which I then can import into a pretty much blank slate into the instruction, or the step of the instruction, it is a lot easier to follow and see where your pieces go, especially if you have a model this size. Yeah, so this is the importance of submodels. Now, also what I want to show you is how far you can go using these submodels. So this is going to look really crazy. There we go. So what I have here is right this bit, this 6x6 plate with all the pieces attached. That is our main model. And then here we have a series of submodels. And as you can see, we have a submodel in a submodel in a submodel in a submodel. So we have, like, we can go infinite amount of submodels. So you don't need to worry. Honestly, you don't need to worry about how many submodels you use, as you can use pretty much an infinite amount wherever you desire. So that is, yet again, that is the really useful feature if you want to make your building instructions easy to understand. And as you can see here as well, is you can use a single piece as an entire submodel. And this is just done by creating a submodel, just adding that one piece in the center of the submodel, and call it a day. And then go back to the model you were editing. What you could also do is, like I showed in the instructions, this one, is the submodel consists out of a couple of steps, and then you implement that into your main model. So that is the importance and additional information about submodels. So now let's get into continue building a main model, or my model that I wanted to show you, and explain anything that comes in my path that needs explaining. Right, so how I'm going to go do the rest of this episode is actually quite simple. I'm going to make it pretty much a time lapse. So if you want to follow me building the model, like you can actually do that, just not at normal speed. It's going to be 4x the speed. And then I'm going to put timestamps below in the video where you can skip to if you only want the information that I provide into how to solve certain problems. So if you're only here for information, you can go to the timestamps. I will also make sure there's timestamps in the description, so you can just click that and skip to the next bit that is of importance. And if you want to see me build the model, you can do that as well. Just remember it's at 4x speed, just so I can keep the video a bit shorter. So anyway, I'm going to get started, and I'll see you in, well, just a couple of minutes, I guess. Hey guys, future me here. A quick note, I'm not going to add any music on the video, so if you don't want to listen to a boring old silence in a time lapse, go ahead and actually open your Spotify and just turn on some music yourself. Simple reason for me is I don't want to get any trouble with copyright on YouTube and stuff. So. Right. So remember how in the previous video I mentioned to make sure to use the right parts? Well, I think that I've actually used the wrong part. This guy right here. I just noticed that there's 3 different versions of this part in LDCad, or pretty much in the LDCad library, and I need to figure out which of these three parts is actually the right one for my C model. So we're going to go over to Rebreakable again, just like the previous episode, where I have my 8880, of which this is of course the C model, and we're going to look up the part that we need and what part number it actually is. So right here we have the part, and as you can see, the part number it says is 4287A. So now we go back into LDCad, and I will show you a nice little trick. So right here we have the part. So when we click it, when we hover over it, you can see on the bottom bar right here, there's going to be a description. And it says it is a 4287B, which is the wrong part, because we need 4287A. Now, there's two ways to figure this out, two ways to solve this. You can delete it and import a new part, which I'm not going to do, because this is still the wrong part. What you can also do is you search for the right part, so that's this one, 4287A, and you double click it. And then what happens is it changes the part in LDCad to whatever you double click. So if I were to change it to, let's say, the slope with a 3 on it, double click and it changes to the slope with a 3. If I click the part that I actually need, double click, it changes to that part. So that's a really nice nifty feature. You should really keep in mind, because if you use the wrong part, it is just find the parts, and if it's multiple, you select all of them, and then you just double click on the part that it actually needs to be, and you fixed your problem. So let me fix that in the other submodel as well, and I'll continue in the time lapse. Right. I've gotten to a point where I have a slight dilemma. I cannot find a piece, and this is a great example to show you what you can do if you can't find your piece, right? So there's a couple of things, a couple of different ways. First of all, you need to know what piece you actually need to have. So I've actually looked up, I went to my inventory again, because I know that the piece should be in here, and I looked for it, and right here I found it. It is a 2907, Initially I thought it was a gear, but it wasn't in the gear section. Now I have found it, but this is an example on what to do if you can't find it. So what we will do is here we copy the part number. So you just say copy, and then we go back into LDCad, and there's two ways you can do this. You can go about this. When you go to the main group, so all the way back to the first bit in your part selection, there's this search tool, and I just say you click the filter, then you paste the part number. That is not the part number I was looking for. Copy, paste. There we go. That was the one I was looking for. Say accept, and it should find your part. And it doesn't. The previous part, it actually did find it. So 2907. Why do you not find? Okay, so that part it doesn't like to find. So that's the part I needed. So there's another way. Why do you not? Let's try a different one. Let's say we do 9244. Say enter, and then it does find ourselves a part. So that's another one. This is the one I'm not going to use, but I'm going to show you which one you could actually use to also have, because this one you can't rotate the individual bit, so that's useless. Delete. But for getting the right part in here that we cannot find, we just select a part, we copy it, and paste it in here. Now remember this little box that I completely ignored or told you to ignore in the previous episode. We're gonna click it, and right here on the top it says reference 3713.dat, and that is the part's name or reference. So if I'm correct and we paste the part number in here, but keep the .dat and hit accept, we're gonna get the part that we actually need. So that is, if you can't find your parts in the parts library, that's the way you can at least try to import your part into LDCad. Now I have to also mention that every once in a while parts actually aren't in the library, or there's a different number used in the library. If that's the case, honestly, all you can do is just find the right numbers. Usually Rebrickable or Bricklink will show you that if there's parts with an alternate number used. So you just look up the part that you need and see if there's an alternate number you can use to find a part in LDCad. Now the next one I wanted to go over, and are you properly in place? You're not properly in place. That axle, I believe, is in the wrong position. Let's check. That is a 3 long. That is in the right position. That is a 2 long. That is also in the right position. Okay, so apparently you stick out? That seems odd, doesn't it? Oh, I see what the problem is. So we do it again. I'll show you again. We hit paste, and then I need to rotate. Yeah, the part is actually bigger. That is something I did not know. Is it? Yeah, it is. I just have it in front of me. It is actually just a tad bit bigger, which, okay. And then, as you can see, because it is bigger, I need to use my grid editing rather than part snapping to position it in the right place. So that is you. Now let's go over to my universal joint, because I've shown you it is where you at. I believe it's in here. No, it is not. There is a finished universal joint in here, but then you cannot use it as a universal joint in your model. Now there is actually a easy way to import. No, not an easy way. There is actually the separate pieces of the universal joint are also programmed into the LDRAW library that LDCad uses. So you can use that. You can try and find each individual piece, or what you can do is LDCad actually provides you with a template that you can use to import all the 3 pieces at once. And then since they are like programmed in as separate pieces, you can then move it, rotate the pieces around. So actually use it as a universal joint. So where can we find it? Go back to the main group, and then right here you have templates. So we click that, and next we hit, which one was it? I believe miscellaneous shortcuts. There we go. And right here we have the universal joint forlong. So make sure it is on light gray. We grab it, drag it in, and then we create a new subfile with this template. Hit select, then say it's a front, front U joint, hit enter, and now if we double click it, we get the U joint, and now we can, if we take the right piece, rotate it, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, now if you go back to your model, it is actually rotated. I do like to change you around a little bit, so do a 180-degree turn. Actually, yeah, it doesn't matter. So now if we rotate this side, the middle piece actually is in the right position and you are rotating as well. But I will set you to straight for now, and I'll put the rotations in later on, and I'll explain also later on why I do it this way. Oh, and by the way, don't worry about the colors. It is a programmed color to, well, just don't worry about it. I can't explain. I'm not that tech savvy. Just honestly, don't worry about it. Here it is the right color, and in the instructions it's also going to be shown as the right color. And so don't worry about it. And I'll get back to... Oh, almost forgot. Sometimes you actually want to make things easier on yourself by moving your submodel into the center spot. So in the middle of the screen you see the blue line, green line, and if I rotate a little bit, we also undo. We also have a red line, and right in the middle they cross. Now that is the center of your submodel. So what I want to do is position the center of my U-joint on the center of the submodel, and this will help me later on a tremendous amount when it actually comes down to adding in the proper rotation for my model. And I'll show you later on what I mean. But believe me, sometimes it is going to make your life easier to center your submodel in the right spot. With that said, it is always great, like a good idea, to at least have the center of the submodel in the center of the structure you're building. But like in this example, it is even more important to have the center in the right position. And I'll show you later on. So anyway, let's get back to the time lapse, and I'll see you in a jiffy. Right, welcome. Next bit, we're going to talk about shock absorbers, because shock absorbers are a dynamic piece that, well, if you really want to animate the spring or put the spring in a proper size, you're going to have a tough time doing it in this program, unless, of course, you use templates. Because, hold on, let me see, do we actually have shock? Yes. Right here we have a list of, do I have dark gray, there we go, of shocks that we can just grab and import. But these shocks don't move, these are static pieces, right? We can double click, nothing happens. Yeah? So if you use these shocks, you're stuck in a position that they are in now, which is fine if you are if you are making basic instructions. But we're not willing to make basic instructions. We're willing to make the best quality instructions we can possibly do. So we're going to put in some extra time. So we're going to go back all the way to the main group and go into templates again. And then there is the miscellaneous shock absorber template. And in here we're going to grab the proper spray shock, which I believe I need this one. 9.5 long soft. Hold on, let me check that for a second. I'm not going to take you to that page because it is just boring. I need a soft spring, 9.5 long with soft spring. This is a medium hard, this is a hard, this is extra hard. So yeah, soft, this is the one I need. So we drag it in, and now we're going to get a pop-up, right? So we're going to create a new MPD subfile with this template. So we hit select. So do nothing. Then we're gonna change this to front shocks, because that is like a real bad spelling of shocks, because we can use the same shock left and right. Honestly doesn't really matter. Now we're gonna turn you around. There we go, and put you in place. Now what this allows us to do, I'm gonna copy him to the other side as well. Hold on. There we go. What this allows us to do is, when we double click it, we can actually compress the shock to wherever we need, and it changes the spring with it. So that is a real nifty feature. We can extend it too far as well, and this, as you can see, the spring just follows the shock. So these are linked together, which is really nice if you want to like actually show how much, like where the shock needs to be mounted in the end. So that's how you implement shocks. And at the moment, my model is actually too low to connect the shocks to the frame. So we're gonna have to do with this for now. A little late actually. Let's also start putting in the angles, because I'm actually at this point right now where I've built the model. And of course, when you're building the model in real life, it's not going to look like, you're not going to have straight suspension arms. And on top of that, we also want to use this model later on to render out a 3D image for a front page, and there we also want the shocks to be, of course, fully extended, because that's the best look of the car, right? So we have to move the shock tower, or yeah, it's not the shock tower, the A-arms and the wheel hub down into the proper angle. So how are we going to do this? This is actually, it's going to require more work than you had hoped, because of course I build it straight now because that's easier to build, but we're going to have to rotate every bit individually. Now here's a little trick I've learned myself, and I also want to give with you. I'm going to turn off part snapping for this initially, and then we're going to take all these axles that are in the that are connecting our A-arms to our main chassis, and we're going to duplicate those and just extend them, right, like that, just like that, because these are the pieces we're going to use as a center rotation. Because if I were to rotate this piece now, you'll notice that it doesn't stick in the right position anymore. So what we're going to do is we click the axle, then we click our A-arm, and we can rotate it now so that the A-arm stays in place. Now the axle does rotate. That's why I copied these axles, because the axle that we want to keep in here needs to stay straight. Yeah, and this just prevents me from having to turn the axle back. So if I'm done, I just delete this one, as I'm only using it to rotate the A-arms. And that's going to make my life a fair bit easier. Yeah, so we're going to move him down. I forgot what angle I put it at, so I'm going to redo it. 25 degrees seems about right angle. So we're going to do that with all of these. So you do click for control click to select multiple parts, and then rotate it to 25 degree. Now you're going to see, of course, that not everything turns with it, but don't worry, that's not a problem. So this guy as well, I'm going to put at 25 degree. Yeah, and this is just our initial thing that we're going to do. And then we go over to the other side. We're going to do the exact same thing. So we take this guy, 25 degree, that is 30, so go 5 back. Yeah, and I'm not going to commentate on all of this, because, I mean, so we have moved all the A-arms. Now what we want to do is I'm going to enable part snapping again, and hopefully this works. And I'm going to select the wheel hub with the pin, and hopefully I can just move it in place. There we go. And it just snaps in place. Yeah, so there's no need for me to worry if I actually have it in the right position. It just snaps in place without hassle. So part snapping is actually really useful. So thank you, Roland Melkert, for, I need to press control, for notifying me about this, because before I did actually all do this with grid-based editing, so moving this around into the right position. Yeah, I was that guy that took the time to actually do it like that. So thank you again for telling me about this feature. Anyway, so that's the wheel hubs, and of course we need to do the same with the shocks and these what do you call it, the little arms. So you just select all of it. No, wait, we start with the axle, of course, and then we select all of it, because the axle is what we're going to use as reference. And then I also need this part, because the axle is going to snap into the hole right there. So we're going to move you down, and it just snaps in place, and we are done. That's it. So moving down, turns out, is not that difficult. But as you probably realize, the what's it called, the universal joint is still out of place. So how are we going to do this? Now, here's a new trick I'm going to learn you. We're going to change our editing mode to nested, because at the moment it is in normal editing mode. So then we can move around the entire submodel. But if we change it out to nested, so on the top right you have this little text. If you hover over it, you can change your editing view. So we change it over to nested. And now what this does is it... Oh, these are in the wrong position. Hold on. Go to normal again, because you need to move over a tad bit. Here and you. Change, turn part snapping off. Hit 1. Hit M and move you over 2. There we go. Now you're in the right position. So go back to nested. Now we can edit each individual part. So right now you don't, if you have normal mode, you can see we manipulate the entire submodel. But if we are in nested mode, we can manipulate the pieces in the submodel. So now if we go to our what is the thingy, our CV joint, we hit the middle part, and then we hit the right part, so the parts that we want to rotate. Then we're going to change the rotate and move it 25 degrees and let go. And now, because I have positioned this correctly, if I'm not mistaken, and oh, you are not in the right position. But this is an easy fix. This is just go back to normal mode and turn on part snapping and move them up. So that's fixed. It was on the wrong position on the axle, so now that is fixed. But if I'm not mistaken, because this was a submodel and I changed something in the submodel, when we go over to the other side, it is already in position. Now I also need to move you up a bit because you're in the wrong position. And that's it. That's how you change. No, that is how you use nested mode to your advantage. If I'm not mistaken, also, because here you can see if I click one thing, it's actually selecting both shocks, because these are the same shock. So if I move you down, yeah, so we're going to use this later on to manipulate both shocks at once and actually seeing where the shock needs to go. So if I am to rotate this bit, it's going to rotate on both sides. We're not going to do that because that is stupid. But in this way, we can actually just edit the shock in its entirety on both sides. Right? So that is what nested editing does. It changes, because this is a submodel, which I duplicated twice. I can change, if I change one side, it also changes the other side. And anyway, I'm going to go back to fixing left side, and we're going to go back into the time lapse because I think I've explained everything here. If not, well, you'll see. Anyway, see you in a bit. Right, we get to the point again where I have to move my shocks into position, because as you can see, now I finally have a mounting position for my shock, so I can move it into the proper place and I can change the height to the proper height. So what I want to do first is change the height to approximately the right height. So we go back into nested editing, like I mentioned previously, so I can edit the submodels into, like, while I'm at my main model, so I can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm going to select the top part of the shock, change to move, and then move it down till I think is the right position. So this is too low. If I rotate the piece now, it is going to undershoot the axle. So actually, would that work? Hold on. No, probably not. But I'm going to move it one up. Yeah, I was just thinking a little bit with part snapping, but probably not working. So move it up again. This is approximately what I think is what I'm gonna need. So now I'm gonna change the editing mode to normal again, and now I'm gonna select the shock, which at the moment we have the wrong rotation point. So I'm gonna take the axle, duplicate it, so I can use this axle as a rotation point. Also select the shock, hit rotate and change it in position. It is so close. This is 5 degrees, so we're going to change the angle of attack to 1 degree per step. This is not 1 degree per step. Is this 1 degree per step? Nah, it is. Okay, so we are approximately not in the right spot. Do I have part snapping turned on? If I... Oh, that is not undo. That is not what I meant to do. Actually, no, that's not going to work now, is it? No, it's not going to work. So what I want to do now, I mean, it is approximately the right spot, right? If you look at the instructions like this, you're going to say, yeah, it's in the right spot. But we can do better than this. So we select both parts again, hit this little box again, which I always said was annoying, and part... No, we are not going to hit that box. That is the wrong one. What we're going to do is right click and say rotate, and the angle is going to be 0.5 because we can't go lower than 1 degree on... Oh, actually, hold on. I need to first make sure that I'm going to rotate on the right axis. So I'm going to change my view a tad bit and now try again. So I'm going to do rotate by 0.5 because I was editing at 1 degree and then I didn't quite hit it. So now say accept and look at this. It is exactly in the right spot. So that's what we want. Now we're going to do that on the other side as well. So we're going to first delete this one. So we're going to duplicate the axle. Yeah, come on. There we go. Then we're also going to select the shock. Now we're going to change out to 5 degree rotation first to somewhat put it in place. So there we go. We have it slightly in place. Then we're going to do right click, rotate. But now I'm going to do a negative 0.5, which then should... That is wrong. So I could have done 0.5, but I can fix this by turning it 1 degree to the right again. And we have the shock in position. So yeah, you can also do negative rotation, but it just turns the other way around. Yeah, so we delete the axle and we are done. We have the shocks set in the right position to also accommodate for proper positioning in the instructions later on. And if we want to render out a 3D image with stud.io, we don't have to do this hassle later on anymore. So this is really just future-proofing my building experience or my process, pretty much. Anyway, that was the last bit. I'm going to talk about the suspension and how to properly put suspension in place, and we're going to continue in the time lapse again. Right, so here we actually have a great example on how to speed up your building process by reusing subfiles you've already used, but then because the original subfile, which is this one, let's turn you in the right orientation, there we go, is actually the wrong way around, we have to mirror it. Now there's multiple different ways you could do that, probably, but the easiest I found is to go into edit. So you have your subfile, which is called rear a top. I have to keep that in mind. And then we go into session on the top left hand corner, and then we say we duplicate this subfile, and then we create a new subfile, and then we're gonna say rear a top 2, hit enter. So now it's a one-to-one copy of the previous subfile. So what we can do now is just turn this pin around and move it over. And I need to move it over slightly more, because otherwise we're going to get some part interference. There we go. And now we've made a duplicate of the original file as a mirrored object. That is not where I need to go. This is where I need to go. So now when I drag in the original rear a top, this is top 2 already, and we're a top 1, you can see the pin is changed over to the other side in the correct position, while practically needing no additional work, because I could just go ahead and create a new submodel and model it myself again, but I find this way to be a lot easier. So now let's do the bottom one as well. So we go to the bottom one, you say duplicate this subfile, create new, then we get, oh damn it, rear a bottom 2, and then again I'm gonna just turn over the part, slightly move it over because interference or whatever you like to call it, and go back to the model I was editing, and I can just drag in rear a bottom 2, and there we go. That's how easy it is to duplicate or mirror subfiles to speed up your build process. Now another one I want to mention quickly is the wheel hub. In this model I've only made this once, and I can just duplicate it for all the wheels as it is exactly the same. So sometimes it's useful to just model a single subfile once and then reuse it over and over again, just like I did with actually the dumbest subfile you can make probably, but the most useful is this guy. It is just the bushing that I need, but anytime that I feel the need that in the instruction I need to point it out in a little box, I use this subfile rather than the original part, so I can actually in the building instructions make it as a call out or as a shout out with a little box showing where it needs to go. I can actually, hold on, let me really quick find an example. Here we go. This is what I mean with that little box with as a call out, just to make things, just to make the building experience for the users that buy our instructions a little easier. Right, here's another problem-solving thing I've cared to neglect up till this point. Right here we have a situation where I add too many parts in a single step. To me, at least in my opinion, there's too many parts in a single step. Now there's two ways to fix this. Number one is you can delete the parts that you've added too many and then create a new step and import those parts again. What you can also do is just add a new step, then select the parts that you want to move over to that new step. Then we hit right click, then we go to stepping, and then move to step, and take the step that you want to move it to. So in this way you can move parts between steps without rebuilding your model, pretty much. So now if you go to step 2, you can see they disappeared in step 1. So now it's a nice and gradual build-up of parts rather than it being from this all the way to that, which for some people is too much, especially modern people. I'm sorry, just build some old sets and you'll realize what you've been missing out on. But it is a simple way. If you misplaced parts in the wrong step, this is an easy way to fix it. Well, it was bound to happen at some point where I forget to press record. Right, so we are near the end of the model, and let's just delete that for a second. And there's one final thing I need to explain, or I want to explain, and that is the functionality called grouping. So what grouping does is it makes that what grouping does is it combines multiple selected parts into a single movable object. For example, on the left mudguard, I've already done this. Right now it is of course a single submodel, but if we change out our editing to nested, what we can do is click a group and then it selects even like 5 pieces, rather than usually when you go to nested it selects a single piece from that group. Yeah, so we can do that on all the things. This grouping will make it easier for us to put this mudguard in place, because of course I don't know the exact angles that these hinge plates need to be at for me to like have it get in there at once, right? So what we're going to do is we go to a submodel right now, and we're going to make multiple groups. In this case, we have the base, which is here. There's one. Then we have 3 subsections afterwards. So we're going to make 3 groups. Now, how you do that is you select all the parts that you want, and keep in mind where you want your rotation point to be. So in this case, how I'm gonna put this on the model is I'm gonna have this at a fixed point, and then I'm gonna rotate all the other bits until they are in the right position. So on this bit, the first bit, it doesn't really matter which part I use as the first part. So we're gonna just select everything, right click, say grouping, and group selection. As you can see, there's also a keyboard shortcut, that is Control G. You can hit that as well and it will do the exact same. So now it is made into a single group. Now what I mean with trying to get the proper center is whatever piece you select first is the piece that will decide where your center point is. So if I were to take the rest of my bits and make it into a group with Control G, whenever I select that group, the center point is the center point of the first piece I selected. Now when I ungroup these, real quick, now if I take one of these hinge plates as a first piece, and then I select the rest, hit Control G, so I group them all. Now if I select a group, the center point is the hinge plate, which is exactly at the hinge, and that is exactly what I want. So keep that in mind. If you make a group that you intend to rotate, make sure that the rotation point or the center point of that group is at your rotation point. Yes, I'm going to do that with the rest of this model for this submodel as well. So select the part, hit Control G, and we have a group. Then the last one, select all the parts, hit Control G, and it is a group. So now we can put this group into our final model. I've already put the wheels on because I forgot to record. So this is where I put the left mudguard in place, and this is where I'm going to put the right mudguard in place. So not a nifty trick, doesn't matter if you want to add a piece in the middle of your building instructions, you can just go to the step where you want to add the piece, and whatever you add there is gonna stick to that step. So right now, if I add my mudguard, it's gonna stay at step 38, and it's not like it's not gonna come in earlier, and it's not gonna come in later. It's gonna stay at step 38, just like my left mudguard is at step 37, right? So now we're gonna take our find our mudguard, which is right around here somewhere. Here it is. We're gonna drag it in, rotate it, and hopefully I can get you in the right position. No, not yet. Let's try again, a little bit more zoomed in. No, still not. I don't like that you turned like that, actually. Hold on. Let's try again. Come on, you little twat. Do I have to go from the bottom side? Come on. I know you want... There we go. Yeah. There we go. That's right. That's how I want it to be. Part snapping is sometimes a bit finicky. So now we have this straight up mudguard and we want to put it in place. How we're going to do that is we're going to go into nested mode like I showed you before, and then we can actually click the groups as groups, not as single pieces. So the first bit we want, like the first moment we want to rotate is right here. So what we want to do is grab all the groups afterwards as well, because if I just rotate this bit, it only rotates that bit and doesn't take the rest with it, and that is rather annoying to work with because you have to then like reposition or like these two as well. So you select the first group, then you select the second group and a third group, or like that doesn't really matter, and now you can rotate to whatever position you think it's gonna be in. I'm gonna guess it is a 30-degree angle, and then we're gonna do the exact same for the second bit, which might be a 50-degree angle, and then the last bit is 30, and as you can see it doesn't quite line up. It needs to hit the edge right here. So what we're gonna do is go to the first part again, select everything, make a tied turn, so Control 1, so it changes the angle of rotation. So now we're gonna move him down 2 degrees, and we're gonna take the second bit, move it up 2 degrees, and then we're gonna take the last bit and move it up 3 degrees. You need to move up one more actually, and then I can move you down a couple, like so, and we're almost there. So I need you to be lower again, so 1 degree. And as you can see, I'm constantly selecting the groups because I have set it up, and even in nested mode you can manipulate multiple parts at once. Yeah, so now it is pretty much in the right place. I need to move it over slightly as well, but for that I'm going to put it in normal mode and select the entire thing, and as you can see, my group center, or my submodel center, is exactly where I don't want it to be. So last thing, this button, change selection center, we're going to click that. Yeah, this is the first time I'm going to show you what that does. So you're going to click that, and then we're going to move it about to where I want you to rotate, which is right about, let's actually put you on the stud. Can we do that? Right on the stud. Okay, now we can hit rotate, move it up, and I believe I want to do a half-degree rotation. That is not what I wanted, a half, so Control R I can click as well, so rotate, then say 0.5, hit enter, and that's going the wrong way, so I take my arrow and do it a single degree the other way, and now it is pretty much set exactly where I want it to be. So it's only rotated half a degree. I mean, yeah, it's an illegal connection type, but honestly, once you build it, you don't really, you don't notice it at all. So, but yeah, that's the bit about grouping and nested mode, and the changing the center point for your rotation. So now it has changed back to where it was before, because I deselected it. What you could also do is preemptively take this model, take your submodel, and move it exactly to that center point you find where your red and blue line crosses, or your red and green line, or blue and green line, where that crosses, and then that is going to be your center point. There we go. I forgot to do that, and I forgot to mention that. So my center point is now offset. Also on the other side, I forgot to do that, so the center point is slightly offset. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. All I have to do now is put the wheels on again. I kind of have done it, so there you go. And yeah, in the next episode we're gonna prepare this model to no, not to, for LPub 3D, because LPub 3D also likes to have some rotation information when creating instructions. So that's what we're going to do in the next episode. For now, this is everything we probably need to do in LDCad to make a proper model. If you have questions or things that you want answered, just put them down in the comments, and I'll see maybe after my full instruction tutorial I might do some smaller episodes on just a specific problem, to how to solve a specific problem, like for example how to make a little box in your instructions that point out where the piece needs to go, right? So like if you're interested in that, leave a comment down below or on the left. I mean, YouTube likes to change things up a bit, and I might get to it later. Anyway, I hope to see you in the next video, and well, good building, I would say.